It's beginning to look apocalyptic everywhere you go. The weather is mighty strange, with droughts and hurricanes. I even saw a fire tornado. Oh, it's beginning to look apocalyptic. The worst is still in store, and the scariest sight you'll see is when the level of the sea is up to your front door. After how we've all behaved, humankind cannot be saved unless we move to space.
A message from Elon Musk and SpaceX. Let's all move to Mars.
If you only knew truth in the rough, crystal clear stories, no time for fluff. Scratch the vinyl, beats that slap tough. Life's a maze, but we got the right stuff.
My name is Richard, and this is If You Only Knew. That video you watched, despite this hour, has 22 minutes. Please give them a like and follow. I think it goes without saying that this video really echoes the sentiment of the moment. You can feel it. It's palpable. Everyone is on edge. And for those of us who've been talking about conspiracies for years, it's still leaving us speechless watching so many of them come true. Now, maybe we've all just become conditioned to the 24-hour news cycle and that there's this unexplainable paranoia. And I think it's fair to say that it's been a rocky 4 years, but many do suspect a black swan type of event to come that grips the entire nation in horror, like a 9/11 or something of that magnitude. With the certification of the presidency going off smoothly without a hitch, to the surprise of many, including myself, many question if we're going to see sleeper cells activated or if they've already been activated. 2025 by no means started off as an uneventful year, with two events tied to individuals connected to the infamous Fort Bragg, which many wonder may be the hub of MK Ultra and mind control, and where the US government may be performing experiments to create the next generation of soldiers. By the way, some of you may also be aware, the person who attempted to assassinate the president-elect was, you guessed it, also from Fort Bragg. Fort Bragg has had a lot of strange history, often somehow connected to the news, but this isn't really a conspiracy. It's actually a huge military complex. Here's a small history and some background on Fort Bragg before we go further down the rabbit hole.
Most people don't know that the largest military base in the world is in the United States. If you trespass here, you are sure to get lost. Fort Bragg, also known as Fort Liberty, is located in North Carolina. It is not only the largest base in the U.S., but also the largest military base in the world, covering over 250 square miles, 90% of which is used for training. It houses more than 60,000 military personnel. During wartime, the population at Fort Bragg reached 159,000. No wonder Fort Bragg is affectionately known as the center of the military world. Fort Bragg was established in 1918, just after World War I, initially housing only a few thousand people. However, when the U.S. entered World War II, the population surged from 5,400 to 67,000 in just 6 months. It has since been involved in missions including the Vietnam War, Operation Enduring Freedom, Operation Iraqi Freedom, and Operation New Dawn. It is also home to the headquarters of the United States Army Special Operations Command. One of Fort Bragg's secret missions is training counterinsurgency forces in Southeast Asia, laying the groundwork for U.S. infiltration in the region.
Like I said, before we go down the rabbit hole, even if Fort Bragg is one of the largest military operations, it still keeps coming up over and over. This is Russ Dizdar, who was a pastor and preacher who died years ago of illness. He wrote a book titled The Black Awakening that dealt with people who were experiencing trauma, who had served at Fort Bragg, who were victims of ritualistic abuse. The book is about a prophecy that foretells of the activation of these soldiers from these institutions such as Fort Bragg, who are allegedly emotionally conditioned to assassinate or do whatever they are instructed.
Why I used it purposely. When I started dealing with ritually abused individuals, then we dealt with military-oriented, highly trained, programmed shooters and assassins inside of them. When we began to deal with them, I dealt with someone from Fort Bragg for quite a while and a few others. We're sitting in a lake, Conneaut Lake. They reached over and ripped open my shirt to see if I was wired, if I was wiring and recording them. And they were the most sophisticated satanic warrior type person. They knew 5-6 languages. They knew the ancient Twilight languages. They knew how to conjure. They knew how to use Belteshazzar, Okwam, all these old Pictish languages of the Druids to summon. They are the real Luciferian. They've been through many human sacrificial things. So they sat there to tell me some of those things, what they've been involved with, how they sacrifice a human. I'm listening to all this stuff from them. And then they said to me, you have no idea, Russ, how many of us there are out there. How many satanic, they use the term, chosen ones. You have no idea how many. You have no idea what's coming. We smell Christian blood. We are waiting for our day. And when the call is given, millions of us will be released. And they looked at me and said, you believe in revivals and you believe in Pentecost and the power of God. You believe in all that. We believe in the Black Awakening, a multi-continental release of power to activate the program demonized, where they've weaponized the demonic powers to these super soldiers.
There's that phrase again, super soldiers, just like the recent Winter Soldier movie, which is not the only time you've heard this, since it's been a common recurring theme.
Who he was or become non-compliant, they created a series of code words meant to be a fail-safe should something go wrong. These words were harmless alone, but when strung together in the proper sequence, they would completely reset the Winter Soldier's mind to a more acquiescent state. The codes used by Winter Soldier's handlers were Longing, Rusted, 17, Daybreak, Furnace, 9, Benign, Homecoming, 1, and Freight Car, in that order. After properly destroying the mind of Barnes and rebuilding it to their liking, Hydra would send the Winter Soldier on many high-profile missions that, quote, shaped the century.
I'm definitely not the only one who's noticed this and wondering about the events on January 1st and their connections to Fort Bragg and a larger pattern that may be taking place.
But I think what we're seeing here is the activation, or at least a test run, on some of these super soldiers. Now you might be like, what is a super soldier? A super soldier, I will break down for you now, but I played this clip in a previous video where, again, the connection between super soldiers and Fort Bragg. This guy trained at Fort Bragg. The movie The Men Who Stare at Goats, which is based on a nonfiction book, even though the movie makes it out to be a comedy, talks about how these soldiers were trained at Fort Bragg to be super soldiers.
Was trained at Fort Bragg under a secret initiative codenamed Project Jedi. The objective of the project was to create super soldiers. Was trained at Fort Bragg. The objective of the project was to create super soldiers.
Now, as you could see, that was yet another Hollywood movie referencing the supposed operation. We already know that it's been highly effective in getting the average American to think that it's just too fantastic a plotline to be real, and that we, the USA, would never psychologically condition people in order to weaponize them. But we also know that DARPA has experimented with CRISPR and gene editing for national security purposes. Any Google search will verify this. Movies like that are also a great way to get you to see this all as just entertaining, while at the very same time, they make you focus on something completely else. It's the sleight of hand and trick of the eye. Kind of reminds me of this clip from Timcast about the cat laser pointer theory.
That is the op. The op is to get you to believe one thing while they can do something else. And I always call it the laser pointer theory. It's like a cat. You know, you show the laser pointer, the cat attacks it, the hand is somewhere else. And it's manipulating you to think you see what's going on. You know, it makes a good internet video, but in reality, that's what's going on for our intelligence agencies. They constantly are manipulating our opinions and our attention span. And if they can get you to go over here, then you're not.
Now, where am I going with all of this? I mention this stuff because it's only a short time until the start of the new administration, and when chaos on another scale will likely take all of your attention. But right now it's being directed to one thing only, and which in fairness deserves our national attention since it's illustrated a massive, massive failure to provide basic fire services for one of the wealthiest economies in the world. But whenever the media says, look here, I wonder what's going on over there. This is an interview with Director Wray of the FBI just this past Sunday, warning about an imminent attack that completely went under the radar. Now he's pinning it on China, but this just took place the other day when no one was looking.
In his words, not my words, his words, he wanted to conduct the largest attack in the U.S. since 9/11. So what I would say to the American people is that when you think these things are happening half a world away, it's like that little inscription on your mirror in your car. Objects in the mirror are closer than they appear. Chinese government's pre-positioning on American civilian critical infrastructure to lie in wait on those networks, to be in a position to wreak havoc, things like water treatment plants. We're talking about transportation systems. We're talking about targeting of our energy sector, the electric grid, natural gas pipelines. And recently, we've seen targeting of our telecommunications.
I find it interesting that he's so sure that this will come at the result of China rather than another foreign adversary that we know are far more likely to commit acts of terror just based on history alone. I mean, it wasn't that long ago that Director Wray was telling America that white extremists are the biggest threat while completely overlooking the hundreds of rioters and the waves of looters and what were provable threats based on real evidence that we all saw. There is one interesting connection to all this, and that's that China is a communist adversary. And communism did have a strange connection to the fires that really just truly was off the radar for most. While we saw record amounts of arson that were caught on camera, which went viral, we also learned from Eddie Johnson the strange background to Mayor Bass that had an association with a communist group with a history of committing violence.
Let me introduce you to Karen Bass. Back in the 1970s, community activist Karen Bass went on at least 15 trips to Cuba, many with a group known as the Venceremos Brigade, a Marxist group started by the Castro regime to subvert American interests, weaken democracies, and spread communism around the world. Founded in 1969, the Venceremos Brigade organized trips to Cuba every year for half a century. They attracted the most radicalized and delusional segments of the American left, including overtly Maoist and pro-Soviet communist groups. In fact, a Los Angeles police investigator who infiltrated the group testified to Congress saying that to be a member of the brigade, you had to be confirmed as a Marxist-Leninist. As a brigadista and then moving up the ranks to organizer for the Venceremos Brigade, Karen Bass visited Cuba every 6 months. Their mission? To radicalize young, impressionable American leftists in terrorist tactics and guerrilla warfare. Members of the Venceremos Brigade were even taught how to make bombs.
Jesus Christ!
Karen Bass admits, on her many pilgrimages to Cuba, she went to see Fidel Castro speak several times, even calling him charismatic, and upon his death, praised him, saying, "The passing of Commandant en Jefe is a great loss to the people of Cuba, even though the people of Cuba see him as a dictator who impoverished their island." Another group, the M19, took its belief in revolutionary anti-imperialism to extremes, violent extremes. The M19 was the first and only women-created and women-led domestic terrorist group. Since their founding in 1978, M19's tactics escalated from robbing armored trucks and abetting prison breaks to building their own explosives and carrying out terrorist bombings. From 1983 to 1984, M19 bombed an FBI office, the Israel Aircraft Industries building, the South African consulate in New York, DC's Fort McNair, and Navy Yard, which they bombed twice. But that wasn't enough for them. On the night of November 7, 1983, the M19 called the US Capitol switchboard and warned them to evacuate the building. Minutes later, the M19 bombed the north wing of the US Capitol. November 7, 2023 marks 40 years since the M19's bombing of the US Capitol. Members of the M19, like Susan Rosenberg, traveled to Cuba with and were radicalized by the Venceremos Brigade. The South Los Angeles Venceremos Brigade was led by Karen Bass, who is now mayor of Los Angeles.
Now, I don't know about you, but I don't think anybody really heard about this in the media. I think it went completely unnoticed and off the radar while most people were focusing on other things. And I've seen quite a few videos shared on space lasers and direct energy weapons, like this video, despite the fact that these were the homes of the wealthy elite donor Democrats who control the system. I mean, why would a George Soros type of person blow up their own house? Now, I'm not saying that I don't believe in direct energy weapons. They don't exist. But how do you know footage like this is real? How do you know it's from satellite? How do you know it's recent? Most don't question it, but I think we need to think critically and focus on what we do know and what are real threats.
How many people, how many fighters do you think we can expect in each attack?
Well, the 1,000 is all of them. So we're calling it's an Al-Qaeda planned attack, but within those 1,000 terrorists, some of them are ISIS because they want ISIS to be blamed. We have a theory on it. I hate to throw out theories. We think the actual
It's the first time I think you've ever thrown out a theory.
I know. I just send people like she's crazy. I think the more of the fighter types are going to be ISIS because then if they're caught, then they talk. I'm ISIS. I think more of the suicide bombers are going to be Al Qaeda.
Will these attacks do you think these attacks will happen simultaneously throughout the United States? Or will they be one day here, next day here, another one over here next week?
So they want them coordinated. I don't know if coordinated means all at the same time or if coordinated means we do it Monday, we do it Tuesday, we do it Wednesday, we do it Thursday, we do it Friday, just do 5 straight days. But they want to coordinate it. What's coordinated mean? And the other argument we have, does coordinated also mean US and Europe at the same time? And is Europe all coordinated at the same time? So when they say coordinated, we don't know exactly what that means. So they could also be US and Europe at the same time.
What you just watched was an interview between Sean Ryan and ex-CIA operative Sarah Adams on a very real threat. Now, I also want to share with you something else. This is anecdotal, but Brandon Biggs, who predicted the events on January 1st, 6 weeks prior, whose YouTube channel, by the way, is called Last Days, had a vision just like this about the 1,000. And I think it's worth considering, even though it's prophet, just like Russ Dizdar with the Black Awakening. But you be the judge for yourself.
The Lord spoke to me and he said to me, this is bigger than terrorists. I saw it was in retaliation for Assam Soleimani, the man that was taken out in Iraq. I saw that man's face and they said, we have not forgotten his assassination. And they were coming against America, especially Trump, because of a retaliation for what's happened to him in Iran. And I saw this was a government. I saw 1,000 men, 1,000 men that came through tunnels underground, dark tunnels, drug trafficking tunnels, paid major money. This is a hundreds of $1 million operation that has been going on in the last administration, coming over the border over the last 4 years of gathering of supplies, and they are here. I saw darkness in 10 major cities. Listen to me. I saw 10 major cities, and the why I call them 10 major cities is because 1,000 men divided into 10 was 100. And the Lord showed me 100 people per group of attacks, like I told you, coming out of the ground like ants.
I pulled this footage together because between Fort Bragg, communist groups, adversaries in the Middle East, and some prophecies to highlight the credible possibilities of what could be lurking around the corner, but there is one more threat to factor on top of it all, and that is the extreme left. Ben & Jerry's, aka Unilever, essentially the system masquerading as protesters, are sponsoring a rally in D.C. and other major cities on the 18th to protest against the start of the incoming administration. 100 executive orders are planned for day one, and the system isn't happy because it knows that the end of its rule is near. I thought this post on X said it best. This will either start a revolution or it will be the most iconic 4 years the USA has ever seen. So what can we do, knowing that this might be a difficult time? Prepare yourself however you can, but chances are you're already prepared. And you've learned from the past 4 years to be ready in case there's a supply chain interruption or even food shortages if they decided to use a pandemic to justify a chicken and cow apocalypse. But most of all, I recommend that you pray and focus on your relationship with God. It's going to be an amazing era, but I don't think the fight is over. That's why I made this video, to remind you all to get ready and put on the armor of God. Remember Job, and that even if all is lost, you have your relationship with the Almighty. And a nation that has a strong relationship with God cannot be conquered by evil. So pray and renew your connection to God, and ask for discernment in your prayers so that you can navigate these times ahead. I want to leave you with one last uplifting clip. And it's of this footage of a church in LA that remained completely unburnt and spared by the fire. If you like this video, please smash that like button and share it with a friend or someone who needs to see this information. Thank you so much for watching. God bless. My name is Richard, and this is If You Only Knew.
If you only knew truth in the rough, crystal clear stories, no time for fluff. Scratch the vinyl, beats that slap tough. Life's a maze, but we got the right stuff.